Okay. Good evening, everyone. We have Jill Jackson with us tonight, and we are going to be talking about transitioning our kids to college. And I'll let Jill introduce herself and get us started.
Good evening. Hope everybody's doing well tonight. I'm glad you guys could be here with me. And I have three girls. One has graduated from college and is now married. So I have a son-in-law now, which is kind of weird. And I have my middle daughter is going to be a sophomore at Freed Hardeman starting in just a couple weeks. And then I have Allie, and she's going to be a junior in high school, and we're still homeschooling her. So, as one friend likes to say, I'm going out of business, right? So, I'm going out of the homeschool business, but I will just make my little disclaimer here that when Vicki asked me about this topic, and I thought, okay, I can do this, but then I thought to myself, I am no expert on this. Let me tell you, I'm just trying to figure this all out myself. It is a very interesting time in life, and it has definitely been a very it's a steep learning curve. It's very different, and so while I certainly do not claim to have any expert status in this, I will share with you some things that maybe I wasn't so prepared for, and some things that maybe I've not done so well, and maybe a few things that I've done okay. so,
That's good.
so just want to kind of give some food for thought about really kind of four different preparations that we need to make for helping our kids make this transition from our home into the college atmosphere. Some of these things are things that we do for them, and some of them really are more things that have to do with us, things we need to do to prepare for that transition. So there's those two aspects we're going to talk about. I would say, first and foremost, kind of the idea that I'd like to start with is that we have to help them build their house on the rock. And what I mean by that is we have to help them develop a faith of their own. It is not your faith, it is not their father's faith. It has to be their own personal faith and conviction. Our job as parents is to level the ground, it's to provide the footing and the frame, but the cement that's going to solidify those convictions that they have has to come from their own hearts and from their own faith and conviction in God's word. You can't live the Christian life for them. I cannot live the Christian life for my children either. And they are entering a stage in life where you're no longer going to be making decisions for them, that you're going to be experiencing a transition in that regard. So, when we think about helping them develop a faith of their own, I think the first thing we have to understand that it's more than just believing in God. It's more than knowing the plan of salvation and how to obey it. It's more than being morally, sound and good. They have to be fluid in doctrine. They have to know why they believe what they believe. And I'm not just talking about being able to say, there's a verse on baptism here. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about they need to know that other people are going to have different ideas on this, that in the religious world, there are people that don't think baptism is essential, and they need to know why. What are the arguments that those people are going to present? And the sad reality is sometimes there's confusion about these very things in the Lord's church. So we cannot take for granted that they don't need to be equipped to know these things just because they're going to a Christian university. That's a false idea. So they need to start having this ability to be fluid in their understanding and in the scriptures long before they leave our homes. Can your kids explain why baptism is essential for salvation? Could they be able to answer questions with regard to why we as New Testament Christians don't use instruments in our worship today? Do they know the arguments that people will present in favor of social drinking? Can they answer these questions? Um, Even at a Christian university, I promise you, they are going to be confronted with these topics and more. And I want to say, I'm going to relate some different stories and examples tonight if we have time. Not all of these examples and stories are things that have happened at Freed Hardeman, even though that's where my kids are. I mean, I have friends that have kids at other colleges, Christian universities. So this is not a slam on Freed Hardeman. It's just a broad brotherhood problem, brotherhood universities that I'm going to be talking about. So we have to know how to help them be able to not just find those verses, but how to converse with others about what the scriptures teach. Are they fluid in conversation? Are they fluid with their reasoning? And are they comfortable being able to stand up for the truth that they believe in? And if they're not prepared in that way, then we're making them very vulnerable to being blindsided by these newfound ideas that they hear that are going to be presented to them. So I want to tell you why this is so very important. Number one, it's because they are going to have professors that are not sound in every aspect of doctrine. But where they lack in soundness in doctrine, they excel in charisma and charm.
Right.
And they are scholarly, they are so smart, they have all these degrees, they are so friendly, they love the students, and your kids, I mean, they have the potential to get a little bit mesmerized by some of these professors. And if they're not grounded in the word, then that can be potential for a very negative influence. That is just the sad reality of the situation. There's also the problem of what I like to call the talk tank. And this is not so much professor to student, but it's peer to peer. I cannot tell you how many stories I have heard from my kids and from other parents of kids who have relayed these similar type stories, where a bunch of students are going to be sitting around talking to each other. And they start sharing ideas on a particular verse. And the frequent things that you will hear is, well, what I think this verse means, or what this verse says to me, or, what this verse makes me feel. It has nothing to do with what we think or what we feel. It has to do with what God's word says. And there is only one way to view any verse in scripture, and that is God's view. It doesn't matter what we think or feel or what circumstances we may want to twist to make a scripture lean one way or another. But these little top tank sessions are potentially very dangerous conversations that our kids can be engaged in if they are not fluid in doctrine. There's also a very big push on campuses, a push for PC, right? Political correctness. There are so many people that are more concerned about people's feelings or offending somebody than they are about preserving souls. We can't let our kids be that way. There cannot be a disrespect to people. There should never be a disrespect to people when trying to teach people. But there has to be a stand and commitment that a scripture means what it means. Circumstances in life don't change the meaning of a scripture. So these are problems that our kids can potentially face. And if they're not grounded in the word, if they are not fluid in doctrine and in what they believe, if it's not just them going along with what we believe, right? They're going to be blown by every wind of doctrine, like what it talks about in Ephesians 4:14, unless they have that deep development of faith of their own. So when I think about this particular topic, I think about certain things that I think we can proactively do as parents to try to help prepare them. And I think what it boils down to is having frequent Deuteronomy 6 type moments in your home. Um, these things can occur very simply. It does not have to be some sort of like formal interaction. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with saying, hey, at 7 o'clock on Friday, we're going to sit around and talk about why baptism is essential to salvation. You can do that. But for me and our family, I have found that really what has been the most effective moments of teaching for our kids have just been things that have come up in a very natural way. And for instance, our kids are at camp, they come home. What were your Bible classes like? What did you talk about? Right. So if they tell us, oh, they had a lesson on instrumental music, then that's a great opportunity to piggyback on that and say, did they talk about why, a lot of people appeal to the idea that we can still do that today? I mean, you just make an opening, but it's a very natural opening. We can do this the same thing after Sunday morning and Wednesday night Bible classes. What did you guys talk about tonight? And piggyback off of those moments in a very informal way. And it can be a very brief way. It doesn't have to be an hour-long lecture. I'm going to tell you all the things you need to know. Just give them a bullet point. Just tell them one thing, because you're going to have another opportunity down the road to talk about that topic again. So you don't have to tell them everything they need to know in one setting. Don't overload them, but just tell them some little nugget that they can grab onto. I think too, it's not always about talking. It's very easy. Okay, for me, I'll speak for myself. It's very easy to just talk them to death, right? Tell them all the things they need to hear. Well, that's not always the most effective thing. As homeschoolers, we have a great opportunity to take English, writing, composition, and make that a faith building opportunity. Every one of my girls, I have had write papers on various different topics. Why is social drinking not right? And I tell them, I want you to use 3 sources for research to give me the arguments against social drinking. So they're going to get on the Christian Courier and find some articles, and they're going to have to read that article by themselves, and they're going to get on Apologetics Press, and they're going to have to read that themselves. They're going to have to take notes from those things. They're going to have to look those Bible verses up themselves, and they're going to have to formulate those thoughts by themselves. Then they bring me the rough draft, and I have time to talk to them about those things. So again, I'm piggybacking off of that opportunity, and then I send them back to compose the final draft. Use things like that to have them write a paper. Why is baptism essential for salvation? Why we don't use instruments in worship? Why we take the Lord's Supper every Sunday? Whatever different doctrinal issues you want to do, you can take advantage of things like that. Another thing that creates opportunities for conversations to really help them develop this faith of their own, I think, is talking about problems that are maybe taking place within your own congregation. There's times where perhaps there's been someone who's been divorced. Are you talking to your kids about God's laws on divorce and remarriage in those moments? Or maybe somebody that scripturally put their spouse away, but later is going to get remarried. That's an opportunity to have a conversation about that. What about, somebody that's got a substance problem? That's an opportunity to talk to them and to create some groundwork there to helping them build a faith of their own. Some of my most precious memories and some of the times when I feel like have been the most impactful moments on my kids with regard to this kind of thing was Sunday lunches around my mother-in-law and father-in-law's table. So Wayne and Betty Jackson. And we would go over to their house after lunch, and my brother.
Envious of. Wow, wow, wow.
It was special. It was really special. And Jared, my brother-in-law, and his wife Sandy and their boys would be there. And countless times, if you know my father-in-law, he wrote, and a lot of times he wrote about problems that were pertinent to the church, issues and topics that, were relevant to the day and issues that we knew about from Brotherhood Abroad. Take for instance, we're all probably recently aware of the problem that the congregation had where they withdrew fellowship from, the lady that was a lesbian that was living in sin. And look at all that publicity it got. So I'm not talking about dad disclosing private details that were shared with him in confidence. I'm talking about things like this nature that were public and well known. But it created these conversations at the lunch table with all of us. And my kids were listening and absorbing and hearing how reasoning with the scriptures takes place. They listened to the logic of the positions. They heard the different scriptures and the way the positions were supported with scripture, not feelings, not emotions, not what I think, but with scripture. And it provoked a certain type of thought and study pattern in their hearts and in mine, honestly. And that's what I like to call like the positive talk tank, right? The kind that teaches them to be grounded in the scripture by reasoning with the scriptures. And these kinds of conversations are so crucial because these kinds of conversations are what's going to help them develop the thought pattern that's going to make them be mature Christians, that's going to develop studious, thought-provoking Christians. And this is so crucial because you want them to be able to stand like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when everybody else is bowing down. And if everybody else includes everybody else on the Christian campus, if that's what it calls for, right? So these kinds of things are so important. I thought about a couple things. I'm not going to use names on all these because some of these are my friends and I don't want to, reveal any private matters or anything. But, I know of a couple different circumstances where kids found themselves in problems, on campus. One of which was a writing assignment for an English class, or not a writing, I'm sorry, a reading assignment for an English class. And the assignment was a short story about a man and a woman that were committing adultery. And it had very inappropriate sexual content in it. And this was so disturbing to this student. And she talked to her parents about it. And she shared some of it with her parents. And I mean, everybody was kind of mind blown, that this was being suggested as the reading material on a Christian university. And they were supposed to read this assignment and then come into class the next day and discuss this book, And so the student sent a message to the professor and just told him that she was not going to come to that class and she was not going to read that story because it was not appropriate. I mean, once she had started reading and saw what it was, she stopped. And, he said, that he tried to choose things that were less graphic or whatever, but that's not okay. That's not okay. And it thrilled my soul that this student had the courage to say, I'm not coming to this class because I'm not discussing this book, this story. That's what we want our kids to do. I know of another situation where a young girl was dating a Baptist boy, and his parents were not happy about her position when it came to baptism being essential for salvation. And so they wanted her to meet with this boy's preacher, his pastor. So she agreed, and my daughter actually went with her to this meeting. And it was quite interesting because those girls reasoned with the scriptures with this Baptist preacher who wanted to say that all you had to do was accept Jesus into your heart. And they kept saying, well, that's not what my Bible says. And they would take him to verse after verse after verse, and he had no answer for them. And I say that not because I'm trying to toot my own horn here. That is not my intention in any way, shape, or form. But I say that because this is the purpose of trying to ensure that our kids have a faith of their own. If all they're doing is rolling through the motions because that's what mom and dad say to do, then they are not going to be able to stand under pressure. Um,
Excuse me, may I make a suggestion?
yes, yes.
One of the most interesting things we did before my son's senior year, my daughter was a freshman in high school. We went through a book that had beliefs of different denominations, and then what the scriptures say about each of those beliefs. So they got to learn about all the different major denominations, and then what we believe, and what the scripture says according to God's word. According to, I'm not making sense. I always get nervous when I'm online, but I was surprised at how much my kids already knew and how comfortable that made them to be ready to go out, and then they can keep the booklet when they're done. So anyway.
That's a great idea. I think that's a wonderful suggestion. And I think it is just so crucial that they understand and have an awareness of these different points of view, because if they don't, then when somebody poses the question to them, they're just going to stammer. They're not going to know how to respond to it.
Yeah, and they had to deal with it. My daughter went to the local camp that is used together by lots of the congregations in North Carolina, and they had some teachers that they had to discuss scripture with. So I was proud of them, my daughter and her friends. My son wasn't there, but it just tells you that many people do not know the scriptures, or they don't care to know them. And it doesn't matter where you go, you have to be prepared.
Yeah, I think you're so right. And unfortunately, I mean, I share that same type of circumstance because we have been at church camp too, where we have encountered some of those same issues. Anytime you have a collection of people together, right, you're going to have, some of those issues. And I think it's even more important if our kids are going to a Christian university that they know these things even more, because I think there is a certain danger and vulnerability that they could potentially develop in thinking, well, all these people are going to think the way I think. And that is not the case. It's just not.
Right.
So I think that, the first thing we have to have in mind in preparing our kids for this transition is that in the years that we have them in our home, we have to be doing everything and anything that we can to really help them develop their own individual faith that is not dependent upon what mom and dad are doing, that's something that they are convicted about themselves. Another thing that I would think about, that I guess I would say is more of something that you do to yourself in preparation, is to prepare your kids for college with a transition in mind. When our kids are little, we are the decision maker. We're the ones that make the rules and enforce the rules. But once they leave for college and when they come home on breaks and stuff, there has to be a transition in your parenting style. You cannot demand from a 19, 20, 21-year-old in the same way that you can a 10 or 15-year-old. That said, I'm not suggesting you have no rules. I'm not suggesting, you can't tell your kid to be home, by a certain time and you should let your college kid come in at 3 a.m. No, not suggesting that. And I'm not suggesting that there should not be responsibilities that they still have as a contributing member of the household. But there is a different objective in this stage of life than what there is from 0 to 18. And your objective at this point is to be an influencer, not a enforcer so much. You want them to come to you because you have become an influence that they seek out. You want them to come to you and your husband because they see you as their greatest source of guidance and wisdom. You want them to come to you with their problems or with their big life decisions. There's there's so many things that I don't have figured out. There are so many things that I have done wrong in trying to figure things out. But this is one thing I know for sure. It's that if they don't see and feel this transition in your parenting style, then they're going to think you're being unfair. They're going to think you are being oppressive to them. They're going to shut you out and they are not going to want to come home, and you will lose every degree of influence you have on them. I'm positive about that. If I were a betting person, I would bet my whole life on that. You cannot make all of their decisions anymore. You can't boss them the same way, and you have to shift gears and help them move into independence. And that means you have to shift backward into reverse a little bit. If you fail to make this transition, your relationship is going to suffer. I have a good friend who is in the same boat. You know, we have kids the same age, so we're trying to like dog paddle and figure all this stuff out together. So I'm not casting stones at her in any way, shape, or form. But her daughter started dating someone at college that she did not like. And she had reason not to like him. It wasn't just, I don't like him. She had reasons to be concerned. But her approach in trying to deal with that did not create the greatest outcome. It really created a lot of conflict because her strategy was to tell her she had to break up with him. When she came home from break, she takes her phone, she reads all the text messages between them, she's getting on her Facebook account and, had the password and is reading all the things. And, you can't, well, you can do that. I won't say you can't, people do that. But if you want to have influence on the decisions that your children make, then it is not in your best interest to try to control a 19, 20, 21-year-old like that. It is just not going to go well for you. I can just promise you. I will tell you that when Natalie, that's my oldest daughter, Natalie, she's married now, but when she started college, I just had epiphany after epiphany, and it was just like getting smacked on the face 100 times in quick succession. It was a hard transition, and I was not well prepared for a lot of this. And, at the time we were at a small congregation. We kind of had like the oldest kids of the group, and then there was like a 20-year gap. So I didn't really have anybody that had like just recently gone through this that said, "Hey, hon, buckle up, buttercup, because this transition's about to be a bumpy ride." I didn't have that. And, it hurt me a little bit. So poor Nat was the guinea pig, and it took me a little while to figure things out, and I still don't have it all figured out. But when I just remember thinking to myself at the time, when the girls were little, when you have your babies, you think that is such a test of patience and self-control to deal with the crying baby, or the baby that's up all night when you want to sleep. And then they get a little bigger, and you have all this fighting and bickering with siblings, and you're like the referee all day, like trying to blow the whistle for timeout, and stuff. It's crazy. And you think that those are like the hardest times. But I have to say, you want to talk about self-control. I feel very enlightened now because I know I haven't lived my full life, Lord willing, yet. I'm going to have many more years. But so far to date in life, I'm just going to tell you that the hardest period of self-control in life for me has been parenting young adults. It is so hard. It's hard for many reasons, and I'm going to share some of those things with you. I just want to say, buckle up, because you're not going to approve of every decision they make. And I'm not talking about like sin. There can be sin involved, but but you're going to not approve of certain decisions they make that really don't have anything to do with sin. It just has to do with maturity or just, functioning responsibly. I mean, there's just several things that you're going to encounter like that. I was talking just a couple years ago with a friend from church here in Jackson, and she's an empty nester, so she's a little ahead of this game than I am. And I was telling her about how hard, because I was having to teach a lesson on self-control. That's the context this came from. And I said, I don't know what I did to deserve getting this lesson because I am not qualified. And I was telling her about just the struggle, that I was having with these, college kids and, trying to keep this, self-control in my parenting. And she said, oh, tell me about it. I know, because so many times you just want to tell them, that's stupid. And I started busting out laughing because I thought, well, I wasn't going to be that blunt, but yeah, that pretty much sums it up, it just does, and I was thinking about that conversation with her today, and I don't know what drew my mind back in time, but I was thrown back about 30 years to an episode of The Cosby Show. Did anybody watch The Cosby Show? And there was an episode where Cliff and Claire are talking to their recently married daughter and son-in-law, and they're going to break the news to the parents that he doesn't want to go to medical school and she's not going to go to law school. And so the son-in-law tells first that he's not going to go to medical school, and Cliff, the dad, starts to lose it. And he was like, that idea stinks. That stinks. And he starts ranting. And what does Claire do but pull him into the kitchen? And she's trying to reason with him and get him to calm down and have some self-control. And he gets his composure, and then they go back in. And then the daughter drops the bomb that she's not going to law school. And so then the mom loses it, and she starts telling her how stupid that is and how much money she owes her for her college education. And then Cliff's pulling her off into the kitchen. And I got to tell you, I have like a whole new perspective and appreciation for that now, because I can't tell you how many times Jason and I have come into the bedroom door, closed the door, and we're like venting, like, what in the world are they thinking? Because they're not thinking. Their brains are still baking. They are not the mature adults that you are. So you have to be prepared for those things. And to that, I say in those moments, you're going to have to learn how to pick your battles. Not everything is worth picking a fight over or worth voicing your opinion on, grand as that may be. I have, years ago, the girls and I were looking at some family photos, and we came across some pictures of me when I was a young adult. And I had on this green eyeliner. And, I laughed and I was like, I don't know what my mom was thinking, letting me wear that green eyeliner. That looked terrible. And, they laughed, and we've just snickered about this moment, Well, now I have a daughter that wears her eyeliner in a way that I really don't personally care for. It's not green, but it's just, it's and I have had one of those wonderful little epiphanies, and I'm like, I get it now. I get it. She didn't say anything about the green eyeliner because she was picking her battles. It's not a sin if she wears her eyeliner a little heavier than I want her to. It's not going to keep her from going to heaven. She's a good girl. Pick your battles. You don't have to micromanage every choice and decision that they make. So my grand advice, for whatever it's worth, is I'll give you this little acronym that the girls and I used to use. This was my code language when they were little, when I wanted to tell them something in public without embarrassing them. And it's RTU. RTU, resist the urge. Resist the urge to quit pestering your sister. Resist the urge to do whatever it is you're wanting to do that I don't want you to do, or resist the urge to say whatever unnecessary comment you're about to say. RTU. As moms, now we have to practice RTU, right? So or resist the urge to micromanage every decision they make. Resist the urge to boss them around. Resist the urge to vocalize your every thought on something. They don't necessarily need to know every thought that you have with regard to something.
Seriously,
And
Jill,
what's that?
seriously, can you step on my toes a little bit more?
I promise you, I have injured my own countless times in this because I will tell you, and if Jason were here, he would be probably running in the room if he heard me saying that and saying, yes, listen to the pot calling the kettle black. I'm telling you, this area of self-control is very challenging for me. It is so hard for me not to interject my thoughts. And it's, I just I will cut myself a little slack in the regard that, this has been our business. I mean, as moms, it is our business. And when you homeschool and you're with them all day long too, you don't ever get away from this. From 0 to 18, you are in the business of telling them constantly what you are thinking or what they should do. I mean, from their school assignments to life, in general. So it is a very hard switch to flip. I struggle with it tremendously, and I don't do well with it sometimes. And it doesn't work well for me when I don't do well for it. So you would think I should know better sometimes, but sometimes I cannot keep from spewing things that I don't need to spew. But the reality is, you have to resist the urge to give them that constant instruction or to intervene when you see they're about to make a mistake. And again, I'm not necessarily talking about sin. For example, I have a friend whose son, was in college, and he had a writing assignment due at the end of the week. And she knew he had this writing assignment due. And Monday he doesn't work on it, and Tuesday he doesn't work on it, and Wednesday he hadn't worked on it. And she asked him, don't you have a writing assignment due on Friday? He's like, yeah, I got plenty of time. I got plenty of time. It's not due till Friday at midnight. And so it was like, okay. She knew he was going to fool around and not get that assignment done. But you have to learn to sit on your hands and to keep your fat trap shut, because you do them no favors. If you say, you got to go work on that paper, get in there and work on that paper, you're going to run out of time. Mm-mm. Sometimes you have to let them learn to manage their own time. And sometimes that means they're going to make mistakes and have to reap the consequences. And there is no better teacher than consequences. It's hard. It's hard to sit back when you know they're not making a good choice, or they're making a choice that's going to pose a problem for them. But we cannot be the helicopter mom and constantly be checking up on them. And that's not going to help them advance into independence. It's not going to help that transition. So it's about learning how to resist the urge to intervene, to interject your thoughts, or to correct, or tell them what to do. You have to learn to back off. And I think today, this is probably the hardest part of parenting that I have encountered. Another piece of advice I would give with regard to this part of the transition is you have to parent today with this transition in mind by investing in the bank of influence, because at some point in time, you're going to have to cash in on that. So today and every day between now and when they leave for college, they need to feel they are valued, loved, and that the things that matter to them matter to you. And you achieve that by investing time in them. And I'm going to say specifically one-on-one time with them. From the time our girls were little, Jason and I did what we call special time, where we would just take turns taking just one kid at a time out on an outing. It may just be to go get an ice cream cone. It may be to go get dinner. It may be to a ball game. I have one that's real arts and craftsy, and she liked to paint pottery. So maybe we would go do, a night of painting pottery. It doesn't have to be elaborate, but it needs to be one-on-one quality time. And sometimes, I might take opportunity to bring up certain things I wanted to talk to them about that were important. And other times I just wanted it to be, kind of fit loose and fancy free, just fun. It can't be heavy every time you do that. Um, and sometimes you just want things to be very relaxed because that provides them an opportunity to bring something up if something is on their mind. One-on-one time like that, very important. Make time to do those things. I will tell you also that another thing that we have done is, in addition to trying to, take various family, bless you, take taken various family vacations, that we have also tried to take opportunity to take each child on a trip, just me and one daughter, and same thing for Jason. And sometimes it would revolve around what something they were interested in, or sometimes we would just pick a random place or whatever. It doesn't have to be a week long. I know, we all have budgets, and it's hard. Sometimes funds can be tight with other obligations. Um, that's very understandable. But try to figure out a way to plan some sort of time where for 2, 3, 4 days you can get away, just you and your child doing something that they like to do. And I think that is so important because, to me, some of the most magical parenting moments, so to speak, have happened on these trips. It's one thing to go out for an hour alone with a child. It's another for them to know I have 3 days of undivided attention of mom's. Something happens, they relax into it, they don't feel rushed, and all of a sudden you will find them talking to you about everything and anything that is in their brain. I mean, it's like the conversation dump. They will just unload and unload and unload because that's like one unique opportunity where they have you as a captive audience, so to speak, and you will learn so much about where your child's heart is, about the things that are weighing on their heart, about the things that are important. And it will provide you with very important opportunities to talk to them about the things that matter most, that can help prepare them. So, sometime in those high school years, I would really encourage you to make a point to take each one of your girls. You take one on a trip, and then your husband takes that same one on a trip at a later date. Doesn't have to be back to back or anything. We did these like years apart. But to me, that was something that was very important. And when you have these types of moments, these, one-on-one moments and these different occasions, you are building up your bank account of influence. With every outing, every conversation, or every trip, or every conversation, or every time you're doing something that they like to do, you're building your importance to them. Your opinion is going to matter to them. Your approval is going to be very important to them. You're teaching them to value you because you are showing that you value them. And, here's why this is so important and essential. It's because when they enter this phase, this transition, when they're in college, there are going to be hard conversations. There's going to be hard circumstances that you are going to encounter. You're going to have unpleasant conversations at some point in time, whether it's about, and again, I'm not necessarily saying, oh, your kid's going to just have so many sin problems. I'm not necessarily talking about sin. They may struggle with their grades, and you may have to have some hard conversations about that. They may be, I remember some friends of ours talking about their daughter one time, getting a D in some class, and they're like, hey, what's going on here? And she's like, well, I just didn't want to miss out on anything. She was so preoccupied with the social stuff. But I mean, they had to have a hard conversation with her about that and tell her, hey, you are not there for the social. That's, that's just a bonus, but that's not what you're there for. But there's going to be unpleasant, hard conversations. And there's going to be battles that you do have to pick, about life choices or responsibilities that you just can't not weigh in on. And, those types of moments and conversations are going to create some conflict. But if you've invested in your kids individually, and if you've built up this bank account of influence, then when you have those conversations that are going to deplete that bank account, so to speak, it's still going to be very full and healthy. It's not going to suffer. Um, and, if you have invested this kind of time and love into your kids too, you're not going to have to necessarily be overtly oppressive in some of these conversations, because your opinion, it's going to matter. It's going to weigh on them. Your disappointment, your disapproval, it's going to hurt them in a different way, because they want your approval, because they value it, because you have valued them. So it's going to impact them and cause them to reflect on their choices. um, so I will say too, though, that in those moments, with every withdrawal that is made from that bank account, there must be a rapid deposit. Rapid. Um, Even young adults, I should say, especially young adults, need to feel confident that when they mess up, they can come to you and they can tell you that they messed up, and that they can come as the prodigal did and know that you're going to be waiting and willing to forgive, and that you are going to receive them back without withholding love. Um, you know, I have a friend that told me one time, when his boys were in school and stuff, his advice to them when they left was, you can talk to me, and I want you to know that I do a lot better with bad news than I do surprises. I got to tell you, I love that. He's like, and then they'd be calling him and telling him, Dad, I have a C in economics, but I'm working on it. I'm going to get it to be, better. But he's like, I will handle that much better than finding out you're failing a class after the fact. So I thought that was really funny. But let's see. I messed my thing up here because I mixed my papers up. Let me see. Got it. Okay, so you want them to be able to talk to you about those things, and you want them to know that they can come to you when they mess up. And I will say that, sometimes we don't talk enough about things. And I mean, the parents now, I'm talking about the parents. And I will tell you that, sometimes your kids are going to hurt you. Sometimes they're going to hurt your feelings. Sometimes they're going to think they're smarter than you. They're going to think they don't need your help. They're not always going to be as grateful and mindful and appreciative of the things that they need to be. And they're going to make choices that you're not always going to be happy about. And sometimes we want to lick our wounds a little bit. That's just the reality. And sometimes we don't want to be like the Father and be warm and receptive and be satisfied with an apology, because we want them to feel the gravity of the hurt that they caused us. I mean, that's just keeping things real. Sometimes that's where we are, because we don't always handle things the way we need to. But to that, I want to say three brief things. Are these usually an hour? Is that what we do, Vicki? I didn't hear you unmute.
Sorry. Yes, ma'am. And I just chatted to everybody and said, when we're finished, I usually do a Q&A so they can be thinking of any question they want to ask me.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I'll say three quick things here to that very point about wanting to lick our wounds. First and foremost, we cannot always take things so personal. Okay. Sometimes it's just not intentional. Their brain, it just isn't done baking. They're struggling to figure life out and to juggle responsibilities. And sometimes they are just in a self-absorbed survival mode. And we have to remember that they are in a place in life that they have never been, in the same way that perhaps we are too. So they're just trying to find their way. And sometimes they may not respond and be as grateful as they need to be, or as thoughtful as they need to be, but it's not necessarily personal. So we cannot always interpret things as personal. Um, Next, I would say, remember you did the same thing to your parents.
Mm.
When Natalie went to school, and I mean, this was one of those epiphanies again. And it was like, I just came to realize how many times I must have hurt my mom, not intentionally, but just involuntarily, just because I was young and immature and I just didn't think and appreciate the way I needed to. That's just the life and position of a young person. They don't know what they don't know. And we can't hold that against them any more than our parents held that against us. So give thought to that. And then, of course, most importantly, we have to remember that's not how God responds to us. When we mess up, He is that loving Father that is watching, waiting, that greets us in that warm embrace, that puts the ring on our finger, the robe around us, prepares a feast for us in celebration of our return. And our kids need to know that if they mess up and they return home like that they are going to be well received. Um, I wish we had time to talk about some other things, because there's just so many things that I think are valuable things to think about. I will just kind of as a teaser tell you that in a 30-second wrap up, so to speak, that another thing I would tell you to give thought to is to talk frequently with your kids about problems in the church. Do not let your children go into college with the thought that they are going to be in a place where there are perfect people. The Lord's church is full of people who sin, who struggle with sin, who are tempted by sin and sometimes succumb to sin. We have to use every opportunity that we have to teach our children. When somebody goes forward and it is told that they are expecting a baby out of wedlock, then you go home and you talk to your kids about that. If somebody goes forward and they have a substance problem, talk to your kids about that. They need to understand that they are not going into this incubator, perfect little bubble environment. My girls have known people that have substance problems. They've known people that are homosexual. They have encountered people that teach false doctrine. I could go on and on and on. People that are wrong on divorce and remarriage. The list is endless. And I think sometimes we're a little bit afraid to talk about problems that people are having in the church. And, there's kind of the debate of to shelter your kids from those things or to expose them from it. And I guess I'm kind of in the camp of it's not either or. It's a balance of both. You cannot go on a tirade and run people down in the church. I'm not talking about going home and venting in anger and bad mouthing people or running people down in the church for sport. I'm not talking about telling your kids things that are not age appropriate for them to know. I'm not talking about betraying confidence and sharing situations with them that were entrusted to you. Um, you know, I'm not talking about sharing bad dispositions that you may have with them. But the Bible is full of letters written to churches where Paul addresses problems. In 1 Corinthians 5, he's talking to the church about problems of a sexual nature that were taking place, in the church, how they were dealing with somebody, that had inappropriate relationship. You think about in Galatians, the works of the flesh are written in the Bible. They're talking about, drunkenness, fornication, all these different things. You have other verses that talk about people coming and teaching false doctrine. The Bible is full of church problems being addressed in this type of public way. So there is a place for that. There is a balanced place for that, for the purpose of teaching, for the purpose of correcting. And we cannot shelter our kids so much from problems that then they are like shocked to death when they meet somebody that has an alcohol problem that's a Christian. We don't do them any favors if we don't show them a realistic picture of what the Lord's body is. So I'm 2 minutes over.
Oh, you are fine. Don't stress. Um, so Suzanne, Amber, Jamia, Mandy, Michelle, I'm going to open it up to any questions, comments, compliments, suggestions, whatever you may have. Um, and I'll let myself go after you. I'll let y'all go first. Anything come to mind? Don't forget to unmute if you're going to talk.
So my son met his first girl at Horizons. And he's 18, but we've asked him, you do like girls? He said, oh yeah, I like girls. But he's just never found anybody that was up to his standards. And so it's a pretty big shock for me, because I thought I had him, I was going to be his best girl until he went off to Harding, and then I could deal with it. But no, he had to do this early. So any advice on how to manage this transition? Because I was curious at first. I asked him some questions, and then now I finally said, you tell me what you want to tell me, but give your sister and I some time before you leave, because we're missing you. You're on a video chat with her all the time. So advice in that area, please.
I guess I would say the biggest thing that I think is just trying to teach them to establish boundaries from the onset. I remember several years back when Natalie, our oldest, she's probably like 14 or 15. She was young, not dating or anything like that. And she was talking about going to Freed Hardman one day and, having a roommate and everything. And I don't recall the specifics of how the conversation lended to dating and, things with that regard. But I was talking to her and trying to kind of, in an age appropriate way, share with her that, she needed to think ahead of time about establishing physical boundaries, because, that, our kids may never be tempted to drink. They may never be tempted to do drugs. They may never have a problem with potty mouth or anything like that. But when it comes to, sexual sin, there is nobody that is immune to that, because that is a God-given desire. That is a natural desire that in its proper place and time is intended to be something great. So I had said something to her about, she may know people once she got to college that, she found out were involved in an inappropriate relationship like that. And I was like, you may struggle with that. Your roommate may struggle with that. And she was like, oh, no, Mom, no. She was like, my roommate and I will not have that problem. And my roommate will be a good girl. And I just remember, I wanted to like bust out laughing at her, but, I didn't do that. But I just stopped her and told her, Nat, that has nothing to do with it. That is not a good boy or a good girl problem. That's not the heart of the issue there. There are many good girls and good boys who have succumbed to that temptation, because it is a God-given desire that nobody is immune to. And so from a very early age, we tried to instill within them that there are protective measures, boundaries that they need to have in place to protect their purity. And, that has to do with, limiting an amount of physical contact, obviously, but it also has to do with prevention. Did I say prevention? It has to do with understanding there are certain places you don't go. There are certain situations you do not let yourself get into. You are, when Natalie was even engaged, there was never a time when she and Reagan were allowed to be in this house without Jason or I or her sisters being here. It didn't matter if we were all driving home from church and they were just 10 minutes ahead of us. They could sit on the deck, but they were not to come in this house without us. And, in some ways it's like, well, that's a little overboard. Well, maybe it is. But, to us, I would rather be overprotective in that area than underprotective. And by telling them, no, you will sit on the deck, and I don't care if you're getting married in 2 months or not, you are not married today, and you will sit on the deck. You are instilling within them that there is a certain gravity to the decisions that they make, and that there is a certain care that has to be involved in protecting their purity, and not just for themselves, but for their future spouse, you know. And
Right.
the reality is, you know, sometimes things don't work out. You know, somebody can be engaged and you can't let them think in their mind,
Right.
oh, if I have, you know, some sort of succumb to temptation, well, we're going to be married next month anyway. No, it doesn't matter, because sometimes you're not married next month, because sometimes things happen and engagements.
There's a good movie, Walk in the Clouds, that teaches some of those things.
Well, and along those lines, we have a comment that links to what Jill said last. Amber says, we've learned that when we taught our children to not date around and wait for the one, that we also should have taught them that first girl or boyfriend may not be right for them, and it's okay to break up. No one will judge them. And I agree, because I think there's a lot of pressure to, you know, that by a certain age, you should know this is it or whatever. So she says if she could go back, she would just reassure them that may not be the one.
Good advice.
Yeah, I think that's really important too, because, you know, sometimes things don't, you know, and they may invest a couple years in a relationship with somebody and figure out this is not what it needs to be.
Most of us have done that.
Yeah, you know, and like, I mean, my kids have had friends that, you know, they dated for 3 or 4 years, and then it's like they called off the, you know, wedding, and it's like, you know, we just tell them all the time, well, now is the time to get the divorce. You know, there is something worse than being alone, and that's being married.
Amen.
So, you know, those are kind of our thoughts on that, I guess.
Okay, is there anyone else who would like to ask a question out loud? I don't see any more in the chat room. You're all basking in her all wisdom.
Oh no, it's not all wisdom. I told you, I promise.
I know.
And any little bit of wisdom has been acquired through the school of hard knocks, believe me.
Everybody's so quiet. Okay, well, I reserve the right to, if anybody thinks of something they want to ask, I'll reserve the right to message Jill and share her answer with you. Thank you so much for pouring your heart out, because I know you sincerely care about us wanting to get our kids to heaven, and I really appreciate you sharing, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Buckle up.
Buckle up, Buttercup. Oh, yes, I've got my new Jill Jackson quotes here on my paper. In caps, I have "buckle up," and I have "their brains are still baking." And I mean, I have other good notes too, but yeah, I've got the really good, the good billboard quotes. I've got those. Michelle says, "Thank you, Jill." Hi, Mandy.
Hey, thank you also very much. And then I really think that Jill should, if she's on her phone and not at the computer, that she should walk us all to her living room and show her artwork, because it's stunning. And she should show off for 1 second and show us how pretty that is.
Oh,
Lucky
And
for
thank
me, I'm on the computer.
You cheated.
Well, I know that. Oh, and Michelle says, "Thank you. I appreciate all of your wisdom." I will say, I guess Michelle and Mandy are like me. We still have a little bit of time with our kiddos, at least another year or two. Suzanne's son is going off to Harding. Jamia's daughter is going off to college in Virginia in August. So let's pray for Suzanne and Jamia. Jamia, what's the move date for your baby?
August 16th.
August 16th. Okay.
man.
Like me, something that is going to humiliate it.
Amber has
In
one,
defeat,
one in college. She's got too many for me to keep up with.
It's okay. You leave it.
One in college, two in college, right?
Yes. Sorry. I don't know.
I don't know.
Are you ready?
Okay. So anyway, just thought I'd throw that out there. So keep praying for August date looming ahead.
Church director.
Okay, Amber, one married, one college, one dual enrollment, and the other ones are younger than that. Okay. Dual enrollment. Okay, so yeah. She's got it all.
Hmm.
All right. If there's nothing further, Jill, do you mind to close us in prayer?
Sure. Father, thank you so much for allowing us this time to be together to talk about the principles of your word that guide our lives and to encourage one another in our parenting and in the development of our children. We pray that you would help each of us to be the parents that you want us to be parents that will mature to be influencers on their children, and that we will be the sounding board of wisdom and biblical and sound advice that our children constantly seek. We pray that you would be with each of us as we train our children in your word, that you would help us to help instill them with a faith of their own, and that we would fully equip them to be able to defend the truth and to be able to stand firm in their convictions. We ask that you would be with the ones that will be beginning their respective colleges this year, and we ask that you would give them strength and that you would help them to make good decisions, and that they would desire to continually walk in your paths of righteousness. We pray that you will be with their mamas and their dads, and that you will give them strength, and that you will help them in this period of transition, and that you will help them to do the things that are in the best interest of their children, and that you would help them to have the self-control that they need to, and to be able to make a smooth transition into this new phase of life. We know, Lord, that when we are experiencing circumstances that we have not been in before, that it can be scary and that it is an uncertain time in our lives. And we pray that you would help each one to look to your word and to look to you for guidance and support in that time. We pray your greatest blessing upon each one of these wonderful homes that are striving to rear faithful children, and that you would bless each one of these mamas and their endeavors to educate their children academically and spiritually. And thank you, Father, for sending Jesus to die for us. And it's in his name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jill.
You're welcome. Glad to do it.
All right. Love y'all. Have a great night.
Have a good one.